reduces the chances for the occurrence of a catastrophic response. I think yesterday I demonstrated a little bit. There are many variations of catastrophic response, but Goldstein said the catastrophic responses vary, but what they have in common in some ways is they are appearing like an extreme form of anxiety. The mind shuts down, the person cannot think, function stops for a minute. So you have different kinds of catastrophic responses. Yesterday I told a story to a group of people about a doctor that we had in our program. That was still 35 years ago, and he was paralyzed. He had a stroke patient. They wheeled him in a wheelchair. So I was talking to the nurses and I said, I want to demonstrate to you now what catastrophic response is in this particular version. This doctor and I developed a very good relationship. We were friends. So I asked him in the presence of the nurses, Dr. So-and-so, why can't you walk? He says, I'm tired. That was his typical response. So a few more questions, then I said, I would like to explain to you. I was now demonstrating catastrophic response. I want to explain to you what your doctor explained to me this morning why you have difficulty walking. And I say, you are a doctor, you know the circulatory system, and I explained to him a little bit about that. And when you have the danger of having an embolus, then doctors have to prescribe special medication to thin the blood and so on. What happened to you, that's your doctor tells me. What happened to you is that for some reason you threw an embolus which went up to the brain. Before I finished my sentence, he was asleep. So I said to him, this is one form of a catastrophic response. Now, two things I want you to watch. When he wakes up, we'll start talking again. You see, he's my friend. He's not angry. I didn't traumatize him. But I can repeat this thing 10 times a day, and it will always happen like this. You won't be able to finish the explanation and the organ. This is what Kurt Goldstein said, what you said. It's an organismic defense. It's not a Freudian kind of defense mechanism. The organism is built to defend itself against going into catastrophic responses, which is forms of loss of control. In this particular instance, the physician went to sleep. His organism said, I don't want to know why I can't walk, or whatever. But these are dynamic interpretation. It happens automatically without any kind of inner dynamisms. That's what the organism is. Okay. So, reducing the chances for a catastrophic response is one way to give an organized environment for individuals in order to be able to begin the process of rehabilitation. Many people are put in an environment that is too much stimulating or too anxiety or too open-ended, and you have a lot of these problems of catastrophic responses, and certainly learning, which is the sine qua non of rehabilitation, cannot take place until the circumstances are correct. So, number one is to reduce the chances for the occurrence of catastrophic responses, you provide a safe and structured, predictable environment. That's number one healing for the brain-injured individual. The reduction of catastrophic chances, catastrophic responses from occurring, will make it possible for the individual to use still intact abilities that otherwise could not be used. That's Goldstein. And this is where learning and rehabilitation can take place. Here is another one. The prerequisite to feeling healthy, in quotation mark, the way Goldstein said, see, this is a person who will never be the same again, is the voluntary acceptance by the patient of limitations. Goldstein called these restrictions, limitations that have been imposed by the brain injury. So the person has to voluntarily accept What are the things that I can do? What are the things I cannot do? But obviously there is no acceptance without understanding. So that brings us to the next point. An important task of rehabilitation, said Goldstein, is to help the patient become aware of his or her deficits and to understand how and why the organic brain injury has impairments have actually resulted in the person's limitation. So understanding and awareness, the education of the individual. And Goldstein always said you have to use the language and you have to use the methods in the way the patient will understand. So you don't lecture them about Schopenhauer and Freud, but you actually make sure that they learn, and it takes time. For some people, the learning can take place faster, for some much longer. Okay, so understanding and awareness is, of course, the key for the person to begin the process of accepting voluntarily the limitations. Now, this leads us to the next very important issue. This structural. So, in my language now, this is the milieu. This is the therapeutic community approach. Goldstein, of course, was dead in 1965, but I'm sure if he would be alive, he wouldn't disagree with this thing based on his sayings and writings. So the therapeutic community approach, or the milieu, as some people would call it, has a number of elements. The box is the structure. We have no more than a maximum of 13, 14 people who are practicing together, people by patients, I'm calling trainees, who are together for cycles of about 20 weeks, and sometimes they come back for another cycle, more than that. So in this environment, the external structure of the program is how many people, how many peers you are going to interact with daily. It's intensive daily, 4 days a week, 5 hours a day. You have a coaching staff. We call ourselves coaching staff, the professional staff. You have the significant others who are also attending. About 1/3 of the significant others attend the program daily, and they participate in every aspect. And then you have a peer group, which I said, of a maximum of 13 people per cycle. So they are developing a tremendous amount of personal relationships among themselves. Now, what does this buy you? I think it buys us a number of the things that Goldstein wanted very much to make sure that the process of rehabilitation of brain-injured individual should have certain conditions. The therapeutic community will give you a structure. The structure means safety, predictability. The second thing that you buy in it by organizing it in a therapeutic community, that you have the possibility of training the individual to become aware and to understand, why am I here? What are the limitations that were imposed by the brain injury? How will it affect me? What can I do? What can't I do? The next one, in this kind of situation, if it works well, you can begin to use intact abilities that normally you will not find. The injury is not destroying all the capabilities of an individual. Some of the capabilities remain intact, but they are overwhelmed by the anxiety, by the openness, by the being over-challenged. So the beginning of the use of intact capacities, which is very important for the learning and the compensatory process, is going to occur in a situation like that. Next, now you begin to train. Now you begin the education. So the purpose of this education is that the trainees, I call patients now the trainees, will master compensatory techniques. So we have sort of different kinds of aspects that you learn like courses, and they will master own up to, and master becomes skillful to develop compensatory and cognitive training strategies and routines. The next step that you buy in this kind of a safe therapeutic community is that you make sure that the transfer of what they learn within the program will be transferred back into real life at home. And the significant others who are attending the program are our spies, and they tell us, how much the person is transferring into the home environment and how much it does not. We move on with another benefit of this. The functions that the individual has learned to compensate for have to integrate with the repertoire of the functional behavior of an individual. If they will not integrate with the overall normal repertoire of behavior, then the person will only be able to practice, in a sense, what he has learned in the program, and they are not going to live within the program. So the part of rehabilitation, after you can learn, after you compensate, you have to transfer it into your naturalistic home environment, and the significant others help us to see how well they transfer, and there's little breaks so the patients themselves can learn from it. And the important thing then is, in this situation, you could integrate and habituate, becomes like second nature. A trained compensatory skill is only going to be helpful in real functional terms if it becomes semi-automatic. Yesterday somebody asked, how long does it take, do these things last? I think they asked you, George, whether these things last. What we find was, and my point was that this is typical for others, those that have developed good compensatory skills and have managed to transfer it and integrate it with the natural environment, as time goes on, get better and better and better. And the reason for it is because when you ask the person, he says, I don't think about it, I just do it. The more you automatize or semi-automatize this, the more it becomes part of your, quote, naturalistic responses. Often, years later, when you meet some of these graduates, they forget the words they were said, but they remember very well. That's the way they act. And when you look at them, you see a three-dimensional individual well compensated for and naturally taking the break, giving a rest, and it's all done not without opening the book and saying, let me see what's part one, part two. It's done. The final point is, in this kind of an environment, the person accepts what happened in the injury and finds meaning in life. And that's why you quoted today, you say you can't be a sourpuss, and the person says, I'm bitter, I'm defeated, I'm a has-been, and be rehabilitated. To become rehabilitated, you have to find there is meaning to my life right now. Otherwise, the rehabilitation is not completed. Now, to take that structure then, organization, structure, predictability, and familiarity are the key words that I think characterize this. So if you look at one day and one cycle, a cycle is 20 consecutive weeks. If we break down the cycle, we see 20 consecutive weeks of training, 4 days a week. It comes to about 400 up to 450 hours of intensive, ongoing togetherness, work, training, etc., for a person to really get there. And some of them come back for more than one cycle. So the nature of the cycle goes like that. We have different activities taking place that are very well circumscribed and very well identified, and our trainees know exactly what is expected. They learn to know. At the beginning they don't, but they learn how to understand what happens in each. So the first half hour of the day is orientation, and then you have the group exercises, which is our laboratory for what we call psychotherapeutic intervention. Various specific exercises designed specifically to help individuals make sense of what's happening and lead to the they're all interdigitated. So each one of these activities is coordinated with the other activities under one management. Okay? Then you have the cognitive training in the afternoons. And then the whole community gets together and has what we call a community session, where usually a particular question that applies to everybody's experience in rehabilitation is floated. Every individual is planning to answer short and sweet and to the point an answer to that particular question. So if the question, for example, is, what is the value of having a very disciplined work where all of us, including staff, raise our hands? That's one of the trivial questions. They sit down and they prepare in written form an answer, and each one in turn delivers that answer. It's videotaped, so they can take home the videotape and see how they handle this. So everything is reinforcing another element, and the key word is always short and sweet and to the point. Don't meander. Finally, there is the personal counseling, and the personal counseling also includes the family counseling together with the trainee, or sometimes separately. So the personal counseling element involves the trainee alone with the personal counselor, or the trainee with members of the family and the personal counselor. So all of this is integrated. Now we move up. 10 weeks after the beginning of the cycle, there is what we call the first mid-cycle party. Individual trainees are all assigned to deliver little didactic speeches, the new ones, about the program. For example, one has to talk all in 300 words, and they work very much to shape it all up. They deliver a little speech about the value of the cognitive training. Another one delivers the speech about the community, personal counseling, and we assign them clinically according to what we consider to be who will benefit most. And we give some individuals who says, why am I here, and so on, the speech about the philosophy of the program. So the assignment of these little speeches, didactic speeches about the program, is done according to clinical decision of the staff. Then this is followed by a personal statement in public about, I was such and such a person, this was my occupation, then I suffered a head injury, and so on, and what did I learn in these 10 weeks here? It's like an open owning up in front of everybody of a progress note so far. Now, the 10 days after the mid-cycle party, they take a 10-day break. These 10 days give them and us a chance to see what they integrated and they transferred naturally in the home environment when they don't have a program going on. So they manage at home. When they come back, they are debriefed on videotapes and everything is significant. Others are debriefed, and we make a note. One interesting piece of observation. People who come back after this 10-day break and look a little bit better than when they left, they have the top prognosis. Some people come back and for 2 or 3 days have to be warmed up again. And then there are those that come back and you could see they slipped. Now, these are very interesting prognostic indicators that someday I think more experience will have to write them up, because we can correlate these with the level of ultimate success in rehabilitation. Now, we have this kind of our patients call this the pyramid. It has 2 purposes. One is the ideology behind it, what it communicates to the training, and one is practical, didactic. The ideological thing behind it, we say, look, your purpose is to build back your life as much as possible, your intellectual abilities, and to achieve the pinnacle of the Everest, your ego identity should be reconstructed. But in rehabilitation, we cannot go to the top of the mountain. You have to adjust step by step by step. And This is the philosophy behind it. Rehabilitation is a slow progress. You have to have the patience of a saint, and nothing can be done quickly. So if somebody comes back and says, how do I get back quickly? This is not quickly. The other point has to do with if a person, for example, achieved a good level of control of neurofatigue, then, and you ask the individual, where are you now? He says, well, I am in class 3. So they climb up the mountain gradually. When they come to the final reasoning aspects, convergent, divergent, and executive functions training, then they say, well, I am now on the top of the pyramid, I'm almost there. So that's a very good idea for them to take one quick look and find pride about how they have been climbing, graduating from class to class. All of these things are reintegrating in a spiral curriculum, the way they train. So you build one remedial component on top of the other one, they are integrated. But this is the purpose of the pyramid. And our trainees are always referring back to the pyramid. And when strangers come, they are asked to explain to strangers what the purpose of the pyramid is all about.
Excuse me, what does the acceptance refer to?
I'm sorry?
What does the acceptance term refer to? Just after reading.
Okay, that's a very good question. The acceptance of the fact that an injury has occurred, that there is life after brain injury, and rehabilitation and learning to compensate for all of these problems is the way to make sense in order to have meaning in my life. So the acceptance itself has layers. But the ultimate part of the acceptance is I feel pleased that I have achieved, and I'm building up and I'll give you more. This afternoon, since we are going to be together, I'm going to show you actually some videotaped excerpts of how people move on to these stages, and then my colleagues are going to add their 2 cents to it. Okay. Functionally, if one would say, what do you want to optimize in rehabilitation? I think this is outlining. First, we want to develop in a brain-injured individual, again, the quality of reflectivity. Think. Don't jump. Don't answer before you know. Take your time, reason and think. So the quality of thinking and reflectivity, to reflect, is obviously one of the functional things. This ties in with learn how to communicate in a way that people will understand you and you will be able to express as best as possible your way of thinking. So there's a lot of the training that is emphasizing also short and sweet and to the point. Find out what do you want to deliver, what's the message you want to deliver, and get there as quickly as possible without jumping too fast and without meandering around with all kinds of stories that have no relevancy. Of course, this is all matched up by a lot of intensive training about reasoning and so on. The next one is, as a result of this, let's optimize as much as your disability allows you, your cognitive skills, your abilities. What have you got? Usable intellectual reserves now that you could apply in many different ways at work or in study. The next one is social adequacy. Part of the rehabilitation training is your social interpersonal relationships should be such that people will not be bored with you, people should not be running away from you, and people will find the likable qualities in you. And it's beautiful to see how some of the nice qualities of some of these individuals, once they calm down, come out, they become lovable. And we reinforce it, of course. We say, now you are lovable. You were a terror before, now you are lovable. So keep working more, and maybe Prince Charming will come one day and you will be happy. Finally comes the pièce de résistance, the acceptance. So if you want to build this up, it's one link in a chain of functionally definable, identifiable procedures that is expected to occur in a successful rehabilitation. Let me say something about the outcomes. Just a few words. We ask ourselves earlier in years, what are the particular predictors of people who went back to work, each one in a different level of capacity. And we found a very interesting thing. The acceptance was 32% of the prediction, but if you add regulation of affect and you add to it empathic abilities, it comes to about, I'm not good at adding up. How much is it when you add up 9 and 32 is 41? What?
In the 60s.
It comes to about 60% of the variance that was accounted for success in returning to work and becoming adjusted socially by some of these aspects. Of course, duration of coma, the severity, one of the indexes of the severity of the injury, is accounting for 8% of the variance accounted for. It's important, but it's much less important than the other one. Abstract verbal reasoning and visual information processing skills in combination, these are generic labels, have contributed, but altogether, they are contributing only half of the percent variance accounted for those other things. Now, as we move along, I want to show another one. We asked ourselves about 2-3 years ago, is there a way to get away from the external measurements of successful rehabilitation, like going back to work or asking people how he adjusts? Let's ask the individuals to appraise themselves. And we came up with these 6 questions. So we said to the individual, read carefully these questions and rate yourself the way you feel now, after at the end of rehabilitation, from a scale of 1 to 10. 10 would be like the best, and 1 would be the worst. So the first one is, my effort during rehabilitation, you know how they appraise the enormity of the hard work in rehabilitation. My effort during the rehabilitation to overcome difficulties that were caused by my brain injury are either nothing special or outstanding accomplishment. Those that say outstanding, of course, you can imagine, were usually the most successful rehabilitated. The second question is, although different from what it was before my head injury, my present life is going just tolerable or very meaningful. So finding meaning in their life, they had to rate it. The third one was, since rehabilitation, I have been leading an unproductive life at one end or a very productive life. So the individual, although he or she may not be able to do what they did before, they consider this to be a tremendous effort, and they consider this to be very productive. For what I'm capable of doing now, that I understand what the limitations of the injury are, I am a very productive individual. And they wear this with a tremendous amount of pride. And I think for us this is a very good clinical sign that they have achieved one aspect of acceptance. The next one is, do you find peace of mind after all of this? So number 4 is, after rehabilitation, I feel that I am still not at peace with myself. That's the bitter guy, the sourpuss, who is still saying life is worthless because I'm still sourpuss. That's bad. Or the person says, I am completely at peace with myself, or variations of that. And the final one is social life. Some people find it most unsatisfactory, and some people say, find my social life to be satisfactory. So they accepted the relative successes they were able to achieve socially as being meaningful to them and satisfactory. And finally, the ability to establish intimate relationships. And by this, we don't mean sexual relationship necessarily, intimacy. It goes from very poor to excellent. One of the interesting findings we did, successful rehabilitant practically uniformly have rated themselves on this 1 to 10 scale in the upper ranges. And that was our own sample. Our next step was, is that so for successful rehabilitants in the other programs? So we undertook a follow-up question in which, we undertook a follow-up question in which we tested out in 11 countries programs that I'm familiar with. They have neuropsychologic rehabilitative approach there, and we asked them the same 5 questions. And it's very interesting, the results were quite similar. Successful rehabilitants in other programs, it's from Finland, South Africa, Israel, England, you name it, France, Italy, did I leave some? Holland, Denmark. All of these people who have supplied about 15 to 30 subjects, when you looked at the ones that had at least 6 months to a year of successful practice out there in real life after rehabilitation, they all rated very similarly on this thing. Question, is it possible now for us to move in with the zeitgeist of self-evaluative thing? And we found a correlation. Objective assessment of who were successful are correlated very nicely with the self-evaluative things of successful patients. So we are beginning to move from the outside measurements for independent measurements, objective measurements, into making some sort of a correlation between that and subjective evaluation, which is very interesting because this is now part of the fashion, not only to ask objectively, how is he or how is she doing? Let's ask the person. And we find that people who have achieved successful rehabilitation have the capacity to self-appraise themselves and evaluate themselves, which is more or less correlating with the outcomes that were measured by external science. Colleagues, we have been always discussing, if you ask to identify what about the personalities of those people who achieved the best success. And it's very interesting what we found. We are now in the process of evaluating a study that we have done on the first pilot study on the first 45 graduates. Not the first graduates, but the latest one from the program. So we are going to go later on backwards. We routinely administer in the baseline evaluation to our trainees a personality test that is called the Neo-Personality Inventory. We found that to be very much reflective of how we get the impression of personalities. And so we set ourselves, we have only one personality test that we are giving to the individuals, and we want to identify personality characteristics that might be accountable and leading to the individual's success after a brain injury. What pre-morbid personality characteristics would be effective predictors of success after rehabilitation if the person has suffered a brain injury? Now, one of the interesting things that Costa and others who made up the Neo-Personality Inventory say, basically, the Neo-Personality Inventory has been found after a lot of research to basically maintain unaltered basic personality characteristics of individuals throughout their adult life. So if they are throughout their adult life, the same personality characteristics, unless some unusual thing happens like a bird that's schizophrenic or some people who have complete destruction of frontal lobe, you can identify pre-morbid personality characteristics supposedly with the Neo. Amazingly, we took as a hunch and correlated, there are 30 sub-aspects. There are 5 dimensions like neuroticism, gregariousness, dutifulness, and so on. 5 major domains, personality domains, and each one has 6 phasics, 6 subscales. So there is a total of 30 subscales of the neo-personality inventory. And what we found was that 16 of the 30 neo-personality inventory phasics correlated better than significant 0.01 level with successful rehabilitation following a brain injury. And I won't go into it now how we developed, like a rating schema, a number for a rehabilitant index. The best rehabilitant index is the highest score on the index is the most successful in many different aspects of the rehabilitation. Now, we have run a very quick multivariate regression analysis. We said, let's take the top of these 5 and identify them. It yields us 64% of the variance accounted for. Very interesting. So, is there a relationship between premorbid personality and success rehabilitation if the person has the misfortune of brain injury? We say it looks like there is. And we have begun to identify. Let me call to your attention some of these dimensions of the phasics that entered and compete with on the 5 phasics. I said 16 are variable. We don't have enough subjects yet to do multivariate regression with all 16. But one of them is altruism. People who are higher on altruism on the neo-personality inventory, that came out on top. Another variation of personality, positive emotions. People who have the capacity to type in into their positive emotions. Successful rehabilitants have positive emotions. They demonstrated the way they talk to others. The other one is those that were higher on vulnerability. People generally vulnerable to stresses and so on, that was a negative correlation. This also came out as one of the predictors. The less vulnerable the person was premorbidly, the more successful he or she is going to benefit a consumer of rehabilitation program. Next one is people who prior to their brain injury were considered to be by themselves and others as competent to deal with different situations. Some people would call it self-efficacy, but they call it competence, right? Also were the candidates for success. And finally, self-discipline. All of the successful rehabilitants have shown the capacity to work and to apply themselves and to work hard. So when we look preliminarily now to the 5 best predictors, and I said 16 of them have been correlated. When we look at them, I just identified to you, and the multivariate regression analysis came out so far about 64%. So we are beginning slowly to make progress in the direction of finding out the relationship between external measurement of success, of outcomes of rehabilitation, to internal self-evaluative kind of measurements, which I think is fitting the environmental interest today. And the other one is that premorbid personality characteristics that we always suspected have contributed to some of these things are beginning to show some evidence if we pick them up by the right thing. I remember one of the staff says, what if the neo-personality picks up nothing? Then I said, then it means we picked the wrong personality test. Okay, let me stop now, even before I was given the hint. It will give us a chance for people to make some of the comments or questions, and I want to repeat again. After lunch, I understand they'll move us to one room. All 3 of us will be together. We have voluntarily restricted our 3-hour talks to approximately 1 hour, and we'll still leave time for question and answer. And your benefit is going to be that you'll have the benefit of these charming guys for company.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Questions, please.
I'm a little bit deaf, so you
Sorry,
give
I'm not speaking very loud. Just a clarification, at what stage of your program do you give out the personality test to people?
Good
I
question.
think that makes difference.
When we evaluate an individual at the beginning, we give them many, many, many tests. This is when we give them the personality inventory also, in addition to all the other observations. So if we take these individual this test on the assumption that it captures some premorbid personality characteristics, and I'm happy to say that it seems from all this that it does capture, then we have something to look at it after the end of the program and see how they correlate with. Did I answer the question?
So is that the same procedure for everybody? Because you showed us some steps, like the one cycle program. So what is the stage, the exact stage that you use when you give out this, this test? And I mean, is that structured for everybody?
Okay. If I understood you correctly, there are two things that you are asking. One is every individual who applies to our program is being evaluated baseline tests in order to see later on.
So this is at the very beginning then?
At the very beginning, in the first 3 or 4 days, they are given the neo-personality inventory in addition to all the other tests.
Right.
At the end of the program, we want to find again whether there are changes, but the important thing is what I recommend to you right now is we took the most successful rehabilitant of these 45, and we found a very high correlation between these and the dimensions of personality that I mentioned.
Right, okay.
Did I answer?
Yeah, absolutely. And one more question, please. So when you use this scale rating from 1 to 10, so starting with 1, if you can please go back to one of your slides so that I can, so that I know
I
what
would
I'm
happily go
referring to.
back if I know how.
Okay, you press the back arrow.
Let's see.
So there were, at this point. So
Yeah.
the rating scale from 1 to 10. So if I refer to number 2, for example. So number 1 would be just tolerable.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's bad.
You define an answer there. So your starting point is just tolerable. I would probably give another, like a term before this stage. So it's pretty much defined the answers, I think. I wanted to ask you, why did you choose that big rating scale from number 1 to number 10? If, for example, where it says just tolerable, that would be number 1, then tolerable.
Okay.
Number 2, then what would be the next stage? I would say meaningful.
Can I clarify something? I want to make sure. This has nothing to do with the neo-personality inventory.
Yes.
We have made up 5 questions at the end of the program that we give to our trainees, and we say, now that you are finished with the program and so on, please rate yourself on these 6 questions.
Yeah.
So the methodologic issue. So this is basically at the end of the completion of before the patient leaves the program, we ask them to rate themselves.
Okay, so you assess that when the score is towards the end of the scale or in the middle or towards the very beginning of the scale. So it's split into 3 parts, I guess.
No, it goes on a continuum because what we found was that the most successful rehabilitated, or the majority of the ones that accepted and went back to work and so on, have rated themselves from 8 to 10.
Okay.
The majority. Very few of the successful ones rated themselves less than 5. Those that rated themselves a handful, they turn out to be very unsuccessful.
So you do have a smaller range than this then. So there is a range of 1 to 4 that you classify with this term. from 4 to, because the way it looks there, to me, it's like number 1 is what I see, the statement there, just tolerable. Then I would expect number 2 to refer to another statement. But you're saying that there is ranges, there are 3 ranges, one starting from the beginning, the other one the middle, and the other one towards to the end. And I'm not very sure about the distinction.
Yeah, I'm not sure we are exactly on the same wavelength. We took this 1 to 10. We didn't know how our people read. Our question was, will successful rehabilitant find meaning in answering these questions clinically for themselves? Now, so we went from 1, the worst, to 10, the best. When we finished analyzing the data, we found out that the vast majority of people who went back to become successfully rehabilitated have rated themselves between 8 and 10, depending on what they are.
You have different
Η
ranges.
επόμενη ερώτηση, επόμενος.
Okay. Did any one of you have a better answer? Because I'm not sure whether I'm on the same wavelength with the lady. We could talk about it afterwards. Okay.
Thank you. I would like to ask something very general. TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, fit very well, I think, to Goldstein's approach, holistic approach, because they have 2 characteristics. They are, first, diffuse, so localization and focal injuries and so on. We know what he said about focal injuries. It's very fit. Second thing, traumatic brain injuries have an anterior life. So you can cope to go back to this anterior life. What about localized focal injuries on one side, even amputation, even motor injuries?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And on the other hand, what about people having diffuse injuries, but since birth? I mean, let's say, just like this, autistic or something like this.
Right. I'm reminded, I won't tell you the joke, but I'm reminded the joke. It's such an easy question. I'll ask George, would you answer it, please?
You want me to?
Yeah, please.
Well, I'm not sure if we're on the same page on this, but I think he gives me the easy jobs to do. I don't think it's on. Here we go. Okay? No? Yeah, all right. If I understand your question, you're saying this model may be best for people who have diffuse injuries to the brain. Well, you're asking the question, what if you have a focal frontal lesion, or what if you have a focal parietal lesion? Does it work the same, or would you have to modify the program? Is that what you're asking? Okay. And you're also asking the question, what if it's a congenital problem, not an acquired problem, right? Well, Yehuda will have to answer for himself on these things. I just give you my thoughts. If they have a focal injury, you have to ask the question whether or not they need a full intensive day treatment program. Some do, some do not, okay? But if that focal injury has substantially altered their life, where they're not able to return back to work. Oh.
Let's say an amputee.
An aphasic or an amputee? Well, I don't know if these programs work very well with aphasic patients. We've had a couple of them that have been in our programs in the past, but they have to have enough language skills where they're really understanding what other people are saying in order for us to move forward with them. I think if they have a lot of comprehension difficulties and a lot of difficulties with communication, it can be very frustrating for them and other group members to move forward. I mean, that's been our experience. Yehuda.
True. We select out people with severe receptive aphasia. Some of them have mild expressive aphasia with a little receptive, but if they are very much aphasic, we don't take them in the program because they won't be able to interact. So we select them out.
I think the congenital one is a more complicated question because it depends on how far have they developed. And from my own perspective, I have 2 basic questions. Can I help the person be productive again? You have productivity. It doesn't mean they have to work for money, but can they do something that is productive, something that is of value to them and other people? If they have enough cognitive capacity and enough personality characteristics pre or post injury to be productive, then they should be in a program like this. If they do not have that element of productivity, I have a question mark in my own mind as to why are we spending all of this time and money? Where are we going with this particular person? The other thing has to do with this issue of intimate relationships. I couldn't agree more. I mean, Freud said to work and to love. Those are the two goals of life for most of us. It should be past that. It's to maintain our individuality as well. But yes, can they establish mutually satisfying interpersonal relationships? That's the way I would phrase it. Is these intimate relationships a two-way street? Are both people happy with the relationship? If you can accomplish this, then you're in good shape. If the developmental problems are so severe that this is highly unlikely, then I'm not sure this is the best kind of program for them, from my perspective. So it's not every patient is appropriate for a holistic program. At least that's my opinion. I don't think every patient
Absolutely.
is, But I think you have to look at those that you feel you have a chance to really move to a productive lifestyle and who have a chance to have enough residual capacity to maintain interpersonal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two big ones.
Yeah. So just to finish, I agree 100%. Who do we take into the program? People who have acquired traumatic head injury, and at this stage of the game, I can count on my hand, on the fingers of my hand, how many people we accepted after a lot of assessment who said that they had either congenital or even before. So that's separate. Traumatic. Now, we accepted people with the infectious disease, post-tumor. The vast majority are people who had either falls or head injuries in car accidents. Before that, we also accepted people with cerebral hypoxia. But not everybody fits this kind of a model. And if we find, for example, that an individual has no cognitive problems identifiable and is only psychologically healthy, then I think another program should be done for them, therapeutic. They should go to therapy. So we accept people who have some need of reorganizing or recalibrating their cognitive abilities, plus establishing the sense of self-esteem and productivity level and so on. But it doesn't take in all types of people, and it's not suitable, in my opinion, like George said, to all kinds of programs.
I'll try to speak loud. I was wondering whether you're following up people after the program and whether you are aware of the relapse rates.
Two questions. The answer is yes, we follow up to the extent possible. Follow-up is expensive. We have been following up at different stages. We are in contact with many of them. And now part two of the question, which is a part of the question, like somebody says, well, how long do these effects last? What we find is, from our own follow-up with people, year after year and so on, that when they come back 10 years later to visit the program and so on, they are much better. And the reason for that is they practice so much automatically what they have acquired that they are a little bit sharper, a little bit better, and that I think they accept. Now, if you're asking follow-up in the sense of going out and making a census all the time, there is a need for that, and I'm sure there is going to be a need more and more for that, but we don't presently systematically do that, but we have a lot of contact with ex-trainees who come back and visit, and we find them out. So anecdotally, I can tell you that they look to be much better if they were successful. It lasts for a year, 2, 3, up to 10 years, even more, unless there is a break of some unusual medical problem, which sometimes there are, or some unusual psychiatric problems. They continue merrily after, and as I said, years later, they look a little bit better than they left.
How long have you been running this program?
30 years.
The problem for reasons, but have the proper numbers, whether there are relapse rates or what is happening.
Are you volunteering to come to do a follow-up? Good. Officially. Yes.
Άλλη ερώτηση.
Okay, I have to understand first the question. You ask, is it safe?
Do we trust the results we get from the personality inventory? But it's given after the
The answer is a little modified answer. At the beginning, we gave the neo-personality, we give a lot of tests. It takes about 3 to 4 days just to finish all the evaluation. So we decided that it would be very useful to put in a personality test. The reason we picked the neo-personality, because supposedly personality characteristics from pre-morbid times have a tendency to persist. Even though the person may have memory problems and so on, some of the personality, so we accepted it on faith. Today, if you are asking me if I like the neo-personality, I like it very much because after we live with an individual for half a year or a year, we're beginning to see very much what they showed on the initial characteristics, that they are there. They reveal their personality characteristic. So, is it safe for you? I don't know. This is different. This is not the neo-personality. This is a different kind of an inventory, right? Did I answer? Is it clear? If not, I'll ask Jim to explain more.
Άλλη
Yes.
ερώτηση.
I would like to ask about acceptance.
Yeah.
It's a goal for your treatment. What about the acceptance of the family, of the members of the family, of having a member with a problem? Because I think that it's very important for your rehabilitation program to have a family that accepts that they have this problem.
Yes, this is an excellent question. That's why we, in our program, insist that the significant others also participate. This is a very crucial thing. And we found many times, I'm adding a little bit more than what you asked. We found many times that the success of the rehabilitation of the trainee depends very much on the emotional support and the backing of the significant other. This afternoon, because we are going to cut down on the menu very much, you are going to see a piece of videotape of one young man who is presently still in the program, where at the beginning, the mother was not that happy about it, and now they are coming along, and you will see for yourself.
Had you an incident of a person from TBI that didn't go as good as he could go because of family condition?
Okay, let me explain. If I understand the question, did we have individuals who could have gone further in rehabilitation but did not progress to their potential level because of the significant other? Yes. Yes. And I'm sure my colleagues will agree. That's very important.
Μία τελευταία ερώτηση και φεύγει. Pardon? Όχι, the last question. The last question. No more. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just one final plug. According to the brochure, we would recommend very much, we will then help you, feed you later on. We recommend very much that you should all come back by 2 o'clock so we have enough time to make one big shindig for 3 people.
Thank you.